I'd just like to conclude with having raised the point that San Francisco's high housing prices contribute to the high wages that employers face in the city and our relatively slow employment growth relative to the rest of the Bay Area. I'd like to just comment upon what would be involved in perhaps making housing more affordable in San Francisco on a grand scale and reinforce the challenge that's involved there with just a little bit of an exercise. I looked at the MLS listings last year for a 3-bedroom house, thinking that a low-income 4-person household at 80% of AMI, what were they facing in the market rate housing market that we have in San Francisco today? And when I looked at the MLS listings, a household at that level, which could afford, assuming they could qualify for a mortgage, could afford about a $488,000 house, that would cover about 14% of the 3-bedroom houses on the market. And again, that's the 80% cohort. And then we looked at different types of ways of making housing more affordable, one of which was a down payment assistance. And in fact, the down payment assistance, if you gave that household $75,000, that obviously allows them to afford a bigger house. And that pushes them up to a level where they could afford about 25% of the houses on the market, the 3-bedroom houses on the market. However, we do have about 56,000 households in that category. And so the cost of making housing affordable to everyone in that group is extremely high. It would cost in excess of $4 billion to provide that level of subsidy to every low-income household. Another thing about large-scale housing demand subsidies like that is it tends to raise the price of housing because there's essentially a flood of money going into housing. And so the winners there are not the people looking for housing, but the people selling housing. Secondly, the city could significantly increase the number of permanently affordable housing units by subsidizing the construction of those units. But I think you'll hear from my colleagues in Mo later, that's actually even more expensive on a per household unit than the city. There's also the alternative of increasing market rate housing construction, which does have an effect in the long run on housing prices. The sensitivity there is not extremely strong, and the level of housing that you would have to build in order to see a significant increase in affordability for low-income housing is large. I estimate that it would take about the construction of 100,000 new housing units to have the same effect of affordability as giving everyone a $75,000 down payment bonus. In other words, making a quarter of the market affordable to low-income houses. Obviously, that would have the advantage of not costing the city $4 billion. On the other hand, 100,000 housing units is a lot of housing. That's all the housing basically that San Francisco has built since the 1920s. So we'd be talking about a very significant change in the way we look at housing construction and build and regulate housing construction in order to have an appreciative effect on diminishing housing prices in San Francisco. So I hate to, I'll just close reinforcing the challenge. Housing is very expensive in San Francisco. It does have economic consequences. It's a consequence of decisions that we've made over a long period of time, and it's expensive and challenging to make significant corrections to that now, either through the side of subsidy or through the sides of increasing construction. I think I'll conclude my comments on that, and I will be around to answer any further questions if you have them later.
Thank you very much, Mr. Egan.